Welcome to Cafe Technica.
Hey guys, welcome to the first episode ever of Cafe Technica. Today we have one of my longtime friends, and we worked together for many years, Jason Fuller. Jason, say hello. Tell everybody about yourself.
Yes, thank you for having me, Tom. It's a pleasure to be your first guest. A little bit about myself. We worked together for a decade, right?
Yeah.
At Technology Solutions. So me personally, I've been in this space for about 20 years. It was my second job out of college. My first one was managing a sporting goods store in the small town that I still live in and that I grew up in. I realized retail was not the life for me. Miserable hours,
Yeah.
just dealing with high school kids that didn't want to be there. So as luck would have it, I was reading our newspaper one day, and there was an ad for an operations manager for a tech staffing company. So I didn't have a clue what that meant, but it sounded a hell of a lot better than selling shoes and Green Bay Packers shirts. So
Yeah.
I applied for it, and I got the job, and 20 years later, here we sit. So it's been a ride. It's been fun. I love it. I love the industry. I love what we do. But yeah, it's been quite the ride. But yeah, here we sit.
Listen, what a good transition into the show, right? Where you found a job through the newspaper and
Right.
totally low tech, right? Like that's the whole mission
That's not even
behind
a
it.
thing anymore, right? A newspaper? I don't even
Yeah,
know that
that's
that's
why it's jobs like that, right?
right.
No, that's awesome. So I didn't realize that was your second job out of college, really?
It was, yeah. So I was born and raised in a small town just north of Green Bay, Wisconsin. I still live here today, but I left for college and I came back. And at the time, it was, gosh, when did I graduate college? I don't want to age myself. The 2002 area. So the job market here was great. This is kind of an area where it's a shipbuilding industry or it's a factory industry. There's, it's a blue collar area. So to find something like this was rare because, we were remote out of an office in a small town called Sister Bay, Wisconsin, but we worked in Chicago, just outside of Chicago. So it was the staffing arm of TechServe POS, which is now level 10. So there's an company still in our space, but yeah, it was kind of, funny how that worked. And yeah, quite
That's
the ride.
wild. So
Yeah.
what did you go to school for? Like, what were you actually graduating?
Basic. I mean, initially I went to college to play basketball. So very quickly I realized there wasn't a market for 6-foot shooting guards in the NBA. So I'd have to maybe go to class and figure something out. So just, the normal business administration with an economics minor. So I kept it very vague, kind of, on purpose. So the options were open. I saw a lot of my friends were, majoring in these kind of, I guess, really direct degrees where there's not many paths to go into. I thought business was just, you do anything, right? Everything's business at the end of the day.
And you've been doing this for 20 years, right?
It's been 20 years. I started in 2005, so I guess 19. But yeah, it was, it'll be 20 years this year. For only really 2 companies too. So that's kind of the cool thing. It was, we were with TechServe POS, now level 10 for about 5 years. And then we came to Core almost 15 years ago. So yeah, it's been 2 companies over 20 years.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And you know what? Like, you don't hear a lot about that either anymore, where people stay with the same company for as long as
very rare.
both of them
know that.
Yeah.
You know that as well as I do. It's, our team here at Core is, we have a couple of people that have been here for 10 plus years, but it's, the bulk of everybody's 2-3 years in, and that's just kind of normal. There's turnover, and, it's just, it's one of those places where, initially, I mean, this as well as I do. We had, we worked for 2 great guys, Jim and Gary, that were kind of the life of the party and the faces of the franchise, and they treated us well, and they gave us the freedom to do our jobs, and that's really all you can ask for, right? So,
that's true. No, it's true. It's all about culture when you're at a business, right? So like, how did you know that like this is what you wanted to do? Like, it always amazes me. Like, I have a weird story too, but like, it's like, how did you know like, oh, this was it?
I came in very blind. I mean, I didn't know what the hell, I didn't know this space existed. So like, I just, I think everybody kind of takes for granted, you're in a retail store, they have all this network equipment and POS equipment. Like, who fixes it when it breaks? Like, who's installing it? That never crossed my mind. It was just never on my radar until, till my first job where I was in a retail environment. And they actually got their first POS terminal as I was leaving. So it was like they had, the old school, like the backup credit card thing where you swipe it, it's got the carbon paper. Exactly.
Yeah.
So as I was leaving, oddly enough, I was leaving to go to a company that installed the stuff that we were getting. So I just liked it. I like dealing, every day is a little bit different. You're dealing with people. Customers can be a pain in the ass, or you could form great friendships with them. So it's I just like the differentness of every day. It's not like Groundhog Day. Every day you wake up, there's a different fire to put out. It's fast paced. The days go by quickly. I just, I like dealing with people. And I like solving problems. And that's pretty much what we do. Is we deal with people, we solve problems.
Yeah, and that's what it is, right? Yep. Like you either have it in you that you want to be like in the fire and fight that. Yeah, that's it, right?
It's not for everybody.
Part of my whole shtick, right, is like there's a lot of technology that goes into that kind of stuff, right? Like working in an office and dealing with customers in the tech space, and we for years we were installing technology solutions and stuff. So like, my whole philosophy is like you and I remember the world before the internet,
for sure. Yep.
And we knew what it was like. Like look at your story, right? You found your way into this business, that way. Yeah. So like, how do you utilize tech, and like what's your general philosophy around like not letting it consume you, right?
For sure. And it's kind of a double-edged sword because like you said, we remember the world before, everything was digital, everything was online. If you wanted to call a girl in high school, you called her. Like you weren't sending it your Snapchat. Like you had to, work up the stones to, know her dad's going to probably answer the phone, and it's but then, that's just how it was back then. You didn't know any alternatives. So I think it's, people ask, is it like better now versus then? And I think you can answer that two completely separate ways, because I think it was more personal back then, but the opportunities and the things you can do now are just, it's a different planet, even compared to 15 years ago. I was in high school, what year is it? 27 years ago. That's holy moly. But like when I was in high school, I had one friend with a bag cell phone and a beeper that we like shared amongst our friends. So like if somebody needs something, it'd be like, they'd have the code that you'd call somebody, you go find a payphone and you call them. Now it's like, is these days, like, you can't even imagine living like that. It's instant communication, and everything is just at your fingertips. And I prefer this world because, I've seen both. And, the tricky part, and I know you have this with Tommy, with your son, is like, you got to find a medium. It can't just be, and look, we all have those days where, you had a hell of a day at work. You just don't want to deal at home. It's like, hey, just go sit at your tablet for a couple hours. Let me decompress here. And as long as you don't make a habit out of that, I feel like it's fine. But I know in some families, it's just your face is buried in a tablet all night. There's not a lot of communication.
It's so bad. Like I struggle with this all the time, and like just being in technology, right? Like people look at me and they're like, "Oh, you must be the most high tech person," and it's like I actually try not to be, because you feel almost guilty, right? Like you said, like you have a bad day at work, and then you throw the kid on the tablet, and you're like, I don't know what they're doing on there, like is that good to them or not? I don't know.
It's a fine line, because you got to find a happy medium of like, you got to have that human communication, but work is stressful. School stressful for the kids too. Sometimes they just want to come home and be like, I don't want to talk about my day. I want to watch SpongeBob for an hour. Just, leave me alone.
Yeah, right.
It's finding that place for everybody. Right. It's tricky. It is tricky, no doubt.
For sure. Yeah. And like, look, you have kids, right? You have 2 kids, you're married, your wife works. Like, how do you guys use technology like with each other? Like, I know with me and my wife, like we sync calendars and things like that. Like what does that look like for you?
We just kind of started getting more, because you have all these tools at your fingertips that you just haven't used. So my kids are still young. They're 8 and 6. So like my daughter got like a cell phone for Christmas from her uncle, but it's just a Wi-Fi, like, it's at home. So like, so there's no like communication with them yet, but yeah, we do like the calendar shares and, the location stuff. Cause she works, I work. So it is good to know, like, if I got to be somewhere, I can just check her location and say, okay, she's on the way, or, oh shit, I better call her. Cause date. So yeah,
Right.
but we're not as in depth as like
Yeah,
you and
yeah.
Michelle probably are with that, with calendar sharing. We're just getting into that. Like we're finally communicating, you know, digitally rather than like, trying to write stuff
Yeah,
out. And
yeah. Yeah.
exactly, like,
On the fridge,
and
like the
enter the
Post-it notes on
century
the
at some
fridge.
point.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we're
yeah.
entering that from a
That's
personal
so funny.
perspective. Yeah.
Are you guys all iOS or
All
you're
iOS.
Android? Like, what
So
are you guys using at home?
Android, I bought a couple, like tablets are Android. We got a couple of tablets, couple
Yep.
I've had, how it is. You have 18 different tablets for your kids, and
Yeah, yeah.
the Android, I just couldn't. It just I've been iOS forever, so the Android is just, it's great to me, and
Yeah.
I just choose not to learn another thing. So I think by default I just go iOS. Are you mainly iOS too, or do you dabble in both?
No, look, I had a BlackBerry, right? And I
I
hung
did
on
too.
to my
Yeah, yep.
BlackBerry forever. And I
Oh,
remember,
I had a Palm Trio. Do you remember those? It
yeah, I
was the
remember
first.
dude, I loved
It had a
Palm.
wand and everything. Yeah.
The way I knew my wife was the woman for me was when we sat in a Starbucks when we were teenagers and we would beam our schedule to each other using the IR on the Palm Pilots.
That's incredible. I mean, you were way
It
ahead of
was
your
like,
time there.
yeah, yeah. It was like this is my girl. Like this
That's
is
when like
yeah,
you propose like the next day, probably. I mean, that's
yeah.
when so everybody has that moment where that's the one, and that was it.
It's really hard with a family though because like you have the kids and like you said they're on Android tablets and then you and maybe your wife are on iOS and then you're trying to make it all work and it doesn't work together. Like it gets really complex fast, you know.
Absolutely. And it's ever changing too. It's, stuff's obsolete in a year. I mean, I have an iPad that my son uses that I don't think I can even download new apps. It's so old because it's like, they
Right.
make it obsolete. So it's like, I have this iPad from, I don't know, maybe the first one ever made. It could be that,
Yeah, yeah.
Gen 1. I don't
That's
know what
really
it is,
funny.
but it's ever
Well, so
changing.
how does that work with work, right? So like you got your family, so you and your wife are trying to sync things up, but like I know at work, like when we were together, you've got calendars, you've got
Yep,
teams, you've got all this stuff, and then customers like they're all on different platforms, right? Like there's
for
Slack,
sure.
there's Zoom, there's so many things that go on. Like what are your like favorite apps? Like how do you organize yourself to be the successful person that you
Yeah.
are at work?
So internally, it's not so difficult. I mean, we use Teams now. So Teams is,
Yeah.
I used Teams before you introduced it. So it was, I had some learning to do, but now, I mean, you can see people's calendars. You can kind of, manage your organization through Teams. But to your point, our customers are using 18 different chats and they want you to kind of be in everything they're in. So that's where it gets challenging is you got Slack. You could have, I mean, people are probably still using Trillion and Yahoo Messenger for
Yeah.
it's ICQ, all that stuff. But no, that's the challenge is that there's so many, everybody has their favorites. Like you got a Microsoft shop or you got a Google shop and you got to kind of,
Right.
you just got to adjust. I mean, you're doing there's a lot of duplication, but yeah, that's the tricky part is making that scalable with all the different ways to communicate these
Is
days.
that your trick? Like that's that's kind of my secret interest, right? So like nobody seems to have a right answer. Like, is that your trick? Do you like duplicate enter things and you're not worried about it? Or is there
Yeah.
like a special app that you use to keep things in sync?
From a community, yeah, it's definitely duplication. It's not the most efficient way. I
Yeah.
feel like it's just the easiest way right now, but maybe you like create this app where you have the tech shaman, Tom. You could do this in your spare time. Have an app where it's like because I think Trillion used to be like that, where you could have multiple different messaging services in one,
Right.
in whatever you call it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, in one app. So yeah, but it is tricky. The lucky thing is our customers. We do have a lot of them are on Teams. So, while we do a lot of different, I'd say 75% of everything is in Teams. And a lot of them have joined too, just specifically to make the communication easier for us. So, but it's tricky.
Right.
It definitely is. It's a lot of moving parts, a lot of different places to be checking, but make sure you're not missing something or it's not efficient. That's for sure.
Well, you know what though? It's funny because I was just watching something and there was like this sales advocate and he was saying, he goes, what makes certain people successful is that they're willing to do the same thing over and over and over again, where most people would give up. That's what makes them successful, that they're willing to just hammer the phones, hammer the email and do the duplicate, triplicate work and that kind of thing. So you're kind of saying the same thing, that like part of your secret is you're willing to just duplicate the effort and say, that's how I'm going to keep my customers happier. And that's what makes me
Sometimes
successful.
you trade customer happiness for making your life just a teeny bit more difficult. And at the end of the day, it's not that big of an ask to say, hey, I got to check 2 chats out. Like, you know what? We're in a customer facing business, and we're in the people business. You make, you do what you got to do, right?
No, you're sort of saying it. And like, honestly, that's my whole mission, right? Like, I think a lot of people, especially younger people, they don't understand that because nobody tells them that when they're growing up, that it's like, hey, you know what's going to make you successful? Your life's got to be a little harder, and your duplicate enter it. Like, you're not gonna, like the automation doesn't make it easier.
Yeah, for sure. It's
that's really funny.
The sooner you learn that, the better too. I mean, it's not. I mean, people always say if it was easy, anybody would do it, right? Sometimes it's just just a little tricky sometimes. But
what about AI? Like, everybody's talking about AI now, and you've got ChatGPT, and like I'm using some of that stuff on my side. Like, are you? What does that look like for you? Are you using AI? Like, do you think it's good, bad? What's your opinion?
I was very skeptical initially about it, but I really think there are things that you can have machines do to keep the people open to do the people stuff, having the relationships with customers and relationship with technicians. So as long as it's the machine is doing something that you don't need a person to do, I've come around to it, ticket entry, just the basic kind of cookie cutter stuff that we do every day that it's a pain for the person. They're blowing an hour of their day where they could take that hour to be making phone calls and preparing technicians better, checking in on customers. I've warmed up to it, but I'll never be at a point where I think you can just have AI do everything. You have to have that human touch. You got to have those personal relationships. But I've warmed up to it. I know your thoughts on AI. I know.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're right. Like, I think there's a lot of strong opinions that like AI in a repeat, like rinse and repeat type of scenario, it works really well, right? And like I've actually found it to be really good at creative writing
100%.
and giving you like a framework when you're looking for something that you're starting from scratch on. But like, there's really strong opinions. I mean, some people are like 100% against AI. Some people are 100% for it. I don't think there's enough conversation.
No, there really isn't. It's not that cut and dry either. I mean, you can say like, hey, I love AI for this, and this, but I wouldn't touch it for this part of the business. So I don't think there's a right way. It's all personal opinion. I'm just big on, I mean, look, you've seen it yourself, like these relationships we have with customers and with technicians in the field. You have to keep that. And I don't think AI can ever replace that. Can it replace blasting out a service ticket and creating a scope of work? Sure, it can. And look, like I said, I've kind of turned the corner on that because I've seen it in action. I see the amount of time that some of this stuff saves, but I'll never be one to say, okay, forget the people, it's machines.
What about your kids? Like, I think about it along the lines of like, can you imagine if you had AI when you had to do book reports and things like that? Like what are your thoughts on that? Like, how are they going to be
It's incredible.
impacted?
I mean, like I was in school and you were too, kind of, I'm a little older than you, but like in high school, we didn't have the internet to look stuff up. It was like, you had to go get an encyclopedia, you had to go to the library and look at old magazines. I mean, it has to be just, I don't want to say easier, but you have so much more information at your fingertips. And I know a funny story, a buddy of mine, his kid is 12 and he thought he could just go and chat GPT and like put a topic in and it would spit out a report. Now they have kind of like a reverse Google image software where they can throw something into some app or some system and it comes out as, likely AI generated. So my buddy's 12-year-old got popped and he got a couple of days suspension from school. So but initially they didn't have that stuff, right? I mean, I would bet there's a population of kids who went through college using all, borrowed articles and not cited just because it was there and, there was no real way to check it. So
yeah, when I was in college, they would teach you to like look at blogs. Like that was the big thing. Like, hey, you can now include blogs in your in your research. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, this is crazy. Like these are people on the internet. Like how do you know if the information is right?
Just spouting bullshit and you
right. Yeah. And now the computer's spouting bullshit. And you're like, I don't know if that's right.
We're back where we were. It's just a computer doing it versus a person.
It's so true. I actually had a funny thing recently where So my son was reading a book for school, and the last chapter we didn't read, right? It was just timing didn't work out. So the next morning he's like flipping through it, trying to get, the gist. And I said, let's use AI to do this. And I asked it, and this thing gave me a whole summary with characters and plot points and all this stuff. And I had been reading the book the whole time with my son. So my son's reading this and he's like, wow, that's amazing. A lot happened in that last chapter. And I'm looking at it and I go, these characters don't even exist in the story. Like, this is like just made up. Like, it's not accurate info. So I started flipping through the last chapter, and like the Chat GPT just made it up. Like, it made up a whole chapter, and it was like totally nonsense. So I looked at it and I'm like, this is an example where AI is just wrong.
Well, dude, because I mean, you're right. Like, you could feed a machine to say whatever. Like, if you have not the best intentions and you're developing this, you can make it say whatever the hell you want. I mean, to fit whatever narrative you want. So it's not even just a story. It could be anything. Like, you could be asking a question about anything, and it could just spit out nonsense, and you're trained to believe it. If you don't ask questions, so you're the kind of guy, you look at them and be like, that doesn't sound right. See, you look into it. Most people aren't right. They're going to take it at face value and they're going to run with it. I mean, that's scary.
I think that's a great point. Like, you have to teach the upcoming generation, like, hey, just because this thing says that, you got to validate that that's right.
Exactly. You got to think on your own too a little bit. I mean, we're kind of getting away from that as a society in general. Just taking everything at face value and not putting any of your own thought into it. And that's pretty terrifying.
That's actually a good segue to something else I wanted to ask you on. So, like, you and I also have the experience, right? So we remember the world before the internet. We also have worked with many generations, right? So, like, we're sort of in this like Gen X, Zennial, sort of millennial generation, but we've worked with guys that are baby boomers, we've also hired people that are like Gen Zers, right? So it's like, so what are you most excited about when you look at your kids or the people that you're hiring now? Like, what's the most exciting thing that you've seen? And then also, what's the most like concerning thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I try not to silo it by generation, because look, you could have people in the same generation that are polar opposites, right?
Right.
I look at it like, just for our staff, our employees, like, I think you can tell pretty quickly just based on somebody's attitude. I mean, and you and I are kind of the same way. We can read people fairly well, that if they're going to work hard or if they're going to cut corners. And look, we have guys in their 30s that just absolutely bust their butt. They're working all day long. They're taking care of their customers. And then you might have, these kids in their early 20s, fresh out of college, where they're just, they treat it like a job. They clock in and out like we work in a bank. It's a 9 to 5 shift, and there's no real strive to succeed or get better. They're just kind of here for a paycheck. And I think every industry has that. But yeah, it's the generational thing is, from a technology standpoint, it's incredible. I mean, you see, you could have guys in their 60s that are wizards, or guys in their 60s that they never bothered to learn anything. They can barely send an email. You got to adjust. But I think the younger generation, like, for the most part, it's, everybody's pretty technology savvy. I mean, I haven't run into a 25-year-old that can't turn a computer on. So it's.
Yeah. Do you find that like the younger people take things at face value more, and that the older generation questions things more, or vice versa? Like, how does that?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think, and that's just that is a generational thing. I think the older you're kind of taught to question everything, to not just read something on Twitter, so that makes it fact. I think and I think that the younger generation will get there. I mean, all it takes is one light bulb turning on experience where you say, hey, I read this and that was complete bullshit. I put into it, I put some time into it, and then I found the truth. So I think it's all about it's personal, right? It's some people never figure that out. They just live their life blindly nodding their head and just doing whatever they're.
That's true.
But I like to associate with people that ask questions and that don't just believe things at face value. And I think you agree. I mean, because those guys, I don't know that I've ever seen you take something and just be like, yeah, that sounds good. Like, you're always looking at angles and ways to improve it, and debunk it in some cases. So I think that's a healthy way to live. It just keeps your brain sharp, and you're
so you're kind of talking about like upbringing and like the breeding within someone, like like how they were raised, right? So like, what are you doing to kind of do that with your kids? Like, how are you teaching them to question things? And like, what do you like? Is there anything that you're
Yeah,
doing?
it's, we definitely encourage, asking questions and being, if you want to be goofy and wear, a striped shirt and leopard pants to school at 6 years old, we absolutely support that. We let them their own
Yeah,
personality. I mean, my wife is in the childcare business, so she's very big on, you know, people going their own way and having their own opinions. There's no right way to do it. You listen,
right.
when they need help, you give them help, but we don't helicopter. I mean, my son is, I always joke,
Yeah.
he's kind of like the Kool-Aid man. He'll run through a wall, but he's also very sensitive too. So he's kind of the best of both worlds. He's a bit of a caveman, but he's also a very sensitive guy. So yeah, I don't think there's a right way to do it to parent, obviously, but we choose to kind of give them the freedom to try things on their own. And, I mean, like I'm sure my parents were 18 and 19 when I was born. So I was raised, you know, I was raised by kids basically. So it was, a lot of things on my own. I'd fall off a bike, I'd skin my knees up, I'd cut my chin, and it just wasn't that big of a deal. And now if a kid falls off a bike and scrapes his knee, it's like, 7 ambulances and, 3 cops in your house.
Yeah, right. I mean, like, but so your wife sees this on a day to day, right? Like, she's there. Like, is there a tech play there? Like, because I know some of these places, like, they
Oh,
have cameras on the kids, and like they put
for
tablets in their
sure.
hands. Like, how does
It's
she deal with
not,
all of that?
I guess it's not like the daycare we would have went to when we were young. So it's a new facility. It's a nearly 20,000 square foot facility, very state of the art. Every room has cameras. All the teachers have tablets. There's an app, so the parents get updates all day long. If it's a baby, it literally says like, little Johnny shit his pants at 12:30, or little Johnny. So
Yeah.
the parents, like, they log into that app. It's amazing. I mean, you know what your kid has done all day long. Communication is done through the app. The food plan is done through the app. So the parents are completely plugged in. But the building itself, it's all, it's very high tech. Everything is done digitally and cameras everywhere. Like I said, it's a great, it's a
Yeah.
very state of the art, very parent and kid friendly.
So do you think, like, I guess in that respect, right? Like, I can assume what your answer will be, but like, do you think the tech has brought people closer
Yeah.
together, or do you think it's kind of dividing
I
people?
mean,
Like,
look, you can probably go both ways, but I do think it's easier to get together. I mean, even if you could have a family member that, like, I have family members I haven't seen for years, but just because you see them on Facebook, you see constant updates, you feel like you have a little bit of a personal connection, even though you might not have seen them in 10 years in person. So I think it might be kind of artificially closeness, but it's closeness, right? So look, if you're a guy who's in your
yeah,
basement and you're playing video games all night, you never have any human interaction, like then you can argue technology is probably not the best for that individual person. But this day and age and in what we do for a living, it's a necessity, and it's all about how you manage it and how you juggle your life, basically.
yeah. You know what? That's actually a really great point. Like, to say it like that, that some people it's good for, and some people maybe not. Right? Like, it'll amplify your best and worst, like, pieces.
That's a great point, Tom. Yeah, absolutely. It does. It amplifies it. It really, it brings it out of you. If you're an introvert, and there's nothing wrong with being an introvert, but you can fall into a tunnel of, like, isolation at that point. You're online, you're in chat rooms, you're playing video games and drinking Mountain Dew all day. Like, it's
You're
and
right.
it happens. We've all seen it where people just kind of get lost in that stuff, and next thing you know, you haven't talked to a real human in a month.
No,
It's
you're right. Yeah, look, that's a great point. Like, I think it would amplify somebody's like good or bad behavior.
yep.
So what do you think
I
about, like,
agree.
all the scams for like older people? Like, they're targeting all these people with like the scams and stuff. Like, do you have to talk to your parents and stuff about that, or like, do you see like how did that?
No, I mean, luckily for me, my parents are, they're 18, 19 years older than me. So they're 60. So they're fairly, they know enough to ask me if they see or they hear something. Like, my dad I got him into like cryptocurrency several years back.
Yeah,
So he's got his app and he'd be like, "Hey, I got this weird message. So, like, send a password." And I'm like, "No, don't do that." So, like, they'll never just go do anything. But my grandma was, and she passed away a few years ago, but it had to be 10 or 12 years ago. She would get phone calls saying, "Hey, it's your granddaughter. I'm in jail. I need you to wire me money." This was,
holy moly.
maybe 2010s. So it's been going on forever. And like she called me. She's like, I just got a really weird phone call, and I was like, well, I'm glad you called me, because some people they'll panic and they'll be like, oh my god, my granddaughter's in jail. Yeah, let me send you $500 in Apple gift cards to get them out of jail. Like, it just doesn't.
Right.
They don't comprehend. But it's yeah, I haven't personally had a ton of that stuff. Have you have had to talk anybody off?
My parents call me all the time with this stuff, so like I'm always dealing with like the like, is this real? Why does this website do this? Or like, I got an email, so it's like I'm constantly dealing with that stuff. But
Yeah,
look, my sister had some identity theft recently, where like she was really worried about
oh
it.
yeah,
Yeah, I became like
yeah,
the go-to, but I mean, it does go on and it's scary. And like, look, my sister's younger than I am, right? So like, it's definitely
sure.
not an old person thing. I think it's like
No, for sure. It's
yeah, like they're targeting
maybe
everyone.
you're just not paying attention much. You click a link. I mean, we've had email phishing attempts. I mean, you and I know a great story which we won't share here about a
That's right. That story will come out at some point, but we've had real life experience with that for sure.
maybe in season 2 of Cafe Technica that will come out. But yeah, we'll keep that one in our back pocket.
For sure, man.
Just goes to tell you that smart people and educated people can still fall for that shit. It's just
No, you're
you're
right.
not focusing, and you just click a link and you don't realize the email address is a
And you
spoof.
can be very technically savvy and still fall for it. So I think I've
For
seen that
sure,
for
for
sure.
sure.
So like, let me ask you this. So you're saying it's a cultural thing, and that like the generational divide really isn't as big as people make it out to be. Like, so there's different frameworks for people, like essentialism, and mutual acquaintance of ours believes in like, what about why and all that. Like, is there a framework that you live by, like either leadership wise or even in your house, like with your family?
Yeah, I think it's yeah, I mean, look, I think communication is definitely the biggest thing, like from any aspect of your life. Like if you communicate and you allow open communication between your team. I mean, look, there are some leaders in our space, in any space really, that their people are just scared to talk because they don't want to get shut down. They don't want to get stepped on in front of everybody. So I think if you set that expectation that, look, you can come to me for anything, and that goes from being a parent, a spouse, a manager, a CEO, whatever it is. If the people that you work with or live with or spend time with know that they can come to you and say, hey, I have an idea, or hey, I don't agree with what you did here. You're not going to get offended by it. I mean, that's a hell of a trait to have. And look, everybody goes through those phases where it took me a while to get that. Like, if I was questioned by somebody, I'd be like, what do you know? Like, who are you to question me? Now it's like,
Yeah.
that's a good call out. Let's sit and talk about this and figure it out. So I think you evolve as a person. As you get older, like you kind of take a step back and you look at all aspects and you value opinions, and you realize that maybe you're not always right, even though.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. I mean, that's good advice in general, right? Like, so what does somebody have to do to like grab your attention then? Like, if they're out there, like, even in life, right? Like, I find that like you associate with people because of certain things and certain qualities and stuff. Like, what does it take to grab your attention?
Look, I mean, I'm very big on like associating with good people, because I like to surround myself with good people. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. Like, I think you don't want to judge somebody based on your first interaction, but that first interaction can tell you a lot about somebody. Like, I mean,
Right.
how they shake your hand, do they look you in the eye, that kind of stuff. So I'm big on like, is this a person? Do I have the same values as this person? Do I treat people the same way as this person? And I feel like, no, look, have I been surprised before where somebody I met at first, I thought they were just a grade A prick and somebody I would never have a relationship with? Absolutely. Like, so, I guess I'm kind of
Yeah.
besides my mouth, where you can learn a lot the first time you meet somebody, but you also can't completely disregard somebody because the first interaction didn't go well. But yeah,
No, that makes
it's a
sense.
tricky one. I mean, look, I've had people that I've associated with for years and years that eventually you just realize that this just isn't a person that I need to be surrounding myself with. They're toxic. They don't bring anything up
Mm.
to the table, and you want to surround yourself with like-minded good people, in my opinion.
No, look, I feel the same way. I think people, the way they act and like, who they are when you're in the room and who they are outside of the room, like
Yep,
that matters
for
lots.
sure, for sure.
I also think like a person's upbringing and like who they are as a person outside of the office, like, not so much what they do for a living, but like who they are as a person.
100%.
I feel like that matters lots. And I agree with you there. Are there any mentors or anybody that like you really found that like impacted your life in a great way?
Yeah, I mean, look, in this business specifically, I was brought in 20 years ago by, I haven't spoken to him in a decade probably, but a guy named Drew Marhine. He brought me in the business. I'll forever be grateful of that. I'm sure you can remember who gave you your first job in the space. And
Yep.
so, Jim Inzalaco, Gary DeDuce, they're the two founders of Cortex. So like with those guys, it was a 15-year relationship. And look, all the people that you work with and work for over the years, it's not only the good things you learn from them, it can be the bad things too. It can be like, you see maybe how not to do things in some cases. And I think that's just as valuable as getting good advice, to see maybe how not to treat people or how not to do things professionally. There's just, everything I think in your journey, everything is important, as long as you learn from your mistakes and you kind of move forward and realize that not everything's going to be perfect. You're going to make mistakes. You might do things you're not proud of at some point. But it's, I think if you're deep down a good human being, you can kind of get by that stuff and move on and make things right. So yeah, I mean, I think we all have the people that we've kind of shaped us to who we are today. Like, now it's kind of a different world in our space now. And I'm surrounded by a lot of guys with just a ton of experience in our space and other spaces. So to hear their opinions on how to do things that, there's things that I maybe never think of that they could bring up that I might not even agree with them, but it's another opinion. And it's, I value everybody's opinion because everybody got to the place that they're at somehow, right? They had to have done something right along the way. So I'm big on taking opinions, and you don't have to agree with everything. You could disagree with everything, right? But
Yeah.
I think you do need to value people's opinions and kind of formulate your own based on that.
No, look, it sounds like you would be a good mentor to somebody. Like, I'm sure you've found yourself over the years, either people that reported to you or like people that you're managing, or even outside of the office. Like, I know you have lots of friends where you're out golfing and things. Like, it sounds like you would be a good mentor to those people. Like, have you found yourself giving that advice to others?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, we got a couple guys that in our organization that, they were on my, maybe back when I was in my project management days, they were PCs for me. And I've kind of, we joke that I've molded a couple of them into mini me's, based on, how you communicate, how you do your job, the value you place on what you do, taking your job seriously. So yeah, I feel like, just internally right now, I could name a handful of people that I'd say, I have personal conversations with about. It's not always work, right? I mean, sometimes you see it, you do it too. Like, somebody's having a bad day. A family member died, a dog died, whatever it is. They just need somebody to talk to. And I don't treat this like it's not transactional for me. It's very personal. Like if somebody works for me and they're busting their ass and they're doing a good job, I owe it to them if they need a half hour to vent or to ask life advice. I always give it to them. That's how I do things.
Yeah.
I'll always do things. That's just.
I feel like it says a lot about you too, right? Like as a person, like,
Yeah.
it's who you are and what you're willing to do to personally invest in people around you.
You can say that all day long, but it's all about your actions, right? I mean, you have to prove to these people that you're somebody they can trust, that you're somebody that they want to work for, because you can talk it all day long. It's all about how you actually, present yourself, and are you approachable and that kind of stuff. So.
Do you think there's like a quality in people that like is just unchangeable? Have you ever met somebody where like this person has a ton of talent, but this one thing within them is not going to change and it's holding them back? Like, what is that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the biggest thing is probably like stubbornness, and everybody's got an ego, right? I mean, you don't get to any level of success without having a little bit of an ego. Anybody who says otherwise, I would strongly disagree with that. But it doesn't mean it's a negative thing. It just means like, hey, I think I'm pretty good at what I do, and I think I have good ideas, and but I think you do have to. And I've been guilty of this in the past too. Is you can't get your feelings hurt over something not going your way, or maybe you don't agree with a decision somebody made. I think ego and stubbornness are just two things that are really hard to get out of somebody. and I've seen it in young guys too, where it's their first job and they, maybe they went to a good college and they think they have the answer to everything. So you give opinions, suggestions, and they just poo poo it and they want to do it their own way. So I don't even think that's an age thing. I think it's just that's kind of like your upbringing, right? Like we talked about earlier. It's, if your parents are.
See, I think there's a technology play to that, and I think it's like people now can be like the kings of their own little fiefdoms, and they can they can tailor who their friends are online and the news feeds that they see, and like all of a sudden it becomes like everything is what you agree with, and it's like that's not how
you
life
just surround yourself with people who think exactly like you do, and then that's Now look, there's a lot less stress and strife if you just surround yourself with people that have the exact same opinion as you, but that's not the real world. I mean,
no,
I have friends that are Republicans. I have friends that are Democrats. I don't give two shits who you vote for. Like I would never I was a big Howard Stern fan, and like I hear and I'm not anymore because I just hear like, well, I've lost a friend over who he voted for. Like I would like be like, who'd you vote for New Jersey City Council? And I'd be like, oh, but we can't continue this friendship. Like that's mind blowing to me. Something that could destroy relationships. Like that's not how I do things.
I was listening to Stern since high school, and I gave up not a couple years ago. Same reason. It was like it became.
I was still listening to the old stuff. The New Jersey guys. I like that stuff. But yeah,
it become that way. No, it's interesting. Look, it sounds like you've got a lot of life advice that you've applied to this stuff, and your opinion is really that like the tech is good and it brings people together, but there's ways to use it, and you're doing it the hard way in a lot of cases, and you're like, that's just how it works, right? Like life is hard, so we do it the hard way. There's no silver bullet, right?
There really isn't. And look, I try to be techie in as many ways as possible. As I say that, I have a notebook with a pen that I, write down the things I want to get done today. Like, that's so right. Like, while in most cases I am using technology, there's still old habits die hard, right? It's like, I always carry a notepad with me.
I remember that you were like paper driven. I find myself doing that like too. Like I find that pen and paper is irreplaceable.
I agree. I mean, I have 50,000 notepads in my office, and they're all full and they have something in them. But yeah, I'm old school when it comes to that. I just like to put pen to paper, and as you're writing it, sometimes you even think of an idea on how to solve that problem. If you're just kind of hammered in your notes, like I don't know, it just seems wonderful to me to write it down with a nice fountain pen and a piece of paper.
Yeah. So where does Jason Fuller see himself? Like what are your ultimate goals? Like you're in the midst of your career. We're sort of in the same spot. We've got families. Obviously, you want to see your kids do well. You want to grow old with your significant other.
For sure.
Like what's still on the horizon for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, professionally, I don't know that I would ever leave this space. I just really enjoy all aspects of it. So, I'd be, here in some context, working with good people and, having customers that I enjoy spending time with and talking to. So I don't think I'd leave this space. I just really like it. Like when you're 20 into something, it'd be tough to pivot into, banking or healthcare or something like that. I just feel like I've done this long enough to know this is what I like doing and this is what I want to do. And then, obviously I want to raise two good little human beings that,
right.
They grow up, they're successful and they're happy. And, I mean, my goals are probably pretty cliched that everybody with a family has, have fun with your kids and, have a good marriage and have a good career and just I'm big on the being happy part. And I know, and we've all felt this, that there've been times in our career where you're not happy and every day is kind of a drag. I'm thankful to not be in that position. I know you're not in that position personally. You can't put a price on that, on happiness and like just being content with where you're at. But yeah, man, it's a tricky one. And you're the same way with Tommy. Like I'm all about my kids. Like it's as long as they're happy, I'm happy. So,
I agree with you. It's that, and I like doing stuff to the house. Like, I always envision like everything goes to hell, and I got to start like whittling wood and things. Like, I just want to make sure that I can still build chairs or something to sit around. Like
for sure.
That's my whole thing.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome, man. Listen, this was really fun. Like, I like hearing about like your take on things. Like, I'm always obsessed with that. So where do people go? Like, where do they go to find out more about you? What are you doing? Like, you give yourself a shameless plug on like everything that you're working on.
Yeah, sure. I mean, LinkedIn is obviously a great, from a professional level, LinkedIn is a good one. I'm starting to get a bit more active. I mean, I'm nowhere near the Tom Roberto LinkedIn yet, but I aspire to be there
Oh,
at some point.
not
But
that
yeah,
good.
LinkedIn is a great starting spot. The usual is Instagram, Facebook. But yeah, our website, shameless plug, is www.core-text.com. So we're constantly adding companies to our portfolio. So a lot of exciting teams that we're adding in our space to kind of make our team more, larger and more scalable, and adding things that we can do. So it's an exciting time for us. But yeah, it's just it's good stuff. We're busy.
That's cool.
Busy is good.
Oh, that's awesome.
Busy is good for a lot.
Busy is good.
It makes the days go by faster, and I like being busy.
Well, and with all the doom and gloom, it's nice to hear that people are actually still working and doing things and like
100%.
out there and making things happen.
Exactly. And we have, I mean, you know this yourself. Our team is just, it's a great team. I mean, everybody works hard. It's I'm in Wisconsin, obviously, and the team is mainly in New Jersey, but it feels like we're just, one big family. It's a great team, and everybody there, so I don't have to preach to you.
Not anymore. You guys are growing really big.
Yeah.
Like, that's cool. Listen, man, I wanted to thank you for coming on. Like, I know
Yes.
that you're the first person I've done this
Exciting.
with. I really appreciate you taking the risk to do this and get out there. But like, thank you for coming on, and hopefully we could do another one like with a group
Yes.
of people that we both
When
know.
this turns into Joe Rogan 2.0, I can say I was the first guest. So that's exciting.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate it.
You got it, man. I hope everybody enjoyed listening, and we'll be back with another episode and new guests with different takes. And maybe they'll make Jason and I feel completely differently about the way we're bringing up our kids and working and things. Thanks for listening.
Oops. Bye-bye.